TimeCop1983 has played a significant role in shaping the contemporary synthwave music scene. He has a very nostalgic and atmospheric sound characterized by lush pads, pulsating bass lines, driving rhythms, and dreamy melodies. In this video, I'm going to show you how to write, arrange, and mix synthwave music using his style as influence. Let's do this. Here are the general aspects of the music we'll make today, all reverse engineered from analyzing dozens of TimeCop tracks. Tempo 95 BPM, key C major. From a harmonic perspective, the track will consist of a 4-bar progression with 2 chords. The chords are C major, played on bars 1 and 2, and E minor, played on bars 3 and 4. Our main stack will consist of 5 parts or voices: drums, bass, harp, a main melodic element, and a secondary melodic element. TimeCop's drums are typically very simple beats, and he favors 80s drum machines such as the Roland 707 and Simmons drums. For our track, we'll go with a 4-on-the-floor beat, an offbeat hi-hat, and a clap. For our track, here's the drum part I came up with. So our kick is gonna be playing 4 on the floor on every bar. The snare, in a typical rock and roll backbeat, is gonna play on the 2 and 4. Then we have the hi-hat playing the offbeats and a double hit towards the end of the 2nd bar and the 4th bar. And finally, we have a clap that plays on the last snare hit or the 4th beat every 2nd bar, so on bars 2 and 4. This is how it sounds all together. As you can hear, the clap is mostly used as an effect and to provide some variation and ear candy. Now let me show you the processing and what samples we are using here. Like I mentioned, TimeCop uses a lot of Simmons drums and Roland TR-707 samples. So in this case, the kick is exactly that, a 707 sample. And I've applied just a little bit of compression to make the kick poke through a little bit. Then our snare is not really a snare, but a Simmons drums tom sample. I just found that it had a little bit more body and the sound that I was going for. The snare has a little bit of processing. Let me show you. So it has a compressor set to a fast attack of 3 milliseconds and a fast release of 50 milliseconds. Not to make it more punchy, but to make it fatter. And we have a 3-to-1 compression ratio, and the threshold just low enough to give us around 3 dB of gain reduction. Let me deactivate the other plugins so we can just hear the snare clearly. Cool. Then I've added a very long reverb because TimeCop is one of the things he likes to do the most. So here it is. It's just a hall reverb set to 2 seconds length. And I have applied low cut and high cut. Low cut just to make it less muddy, and high cut because I don't like all those high frequencies bouncing around in the mix. Finally, I have engaged an EQ where I have applied a low pass filter to remove all frequencies below 100 Hz, and just a little bit here of a cut at almost 200 Hz, and a low pass filter at 7.7K, because there's a lot of high end here that I don't really like. Let's take a listen. That's what I'm taking out, that high end, I don't like it. Cool. Next up, the hats. The hats are a Roland 707 sample. And I've only applied some Hall reverb. That's almost 1,000 milliseconds. And finally, the clap. The clap is an Oberheim DMX sample. And the only processing I apply to the clap is, again, some reverb, Hall reverb, just like the hi-hat. One more time, all together, it sounds like this. The bass will play the root notes of our progression in 16th notes. As you can see here, we're going from C, playing the first two bars, and then go down to E. TimeCop1983 helped popularize the Korg Poly6 Fatline bass patch, and that's exactly what we're using for our track today. Here's the Poly6 and the Fatline bass patch. It sounds like this. I've applied some EQ to make the bass sit better in the mix, at least according to my ears. And what I did is applied a high-pass filter to get rid of most of the sub, because when you play 16th notes in a track like this, it could definitely overwhelm the arrangement. I've also taken out some of the high end. Once more, this is how it sounds. The ARP is a brassy patch that I custom made in Arturia's Prophet 5V. It sounds like this. This is a custom ARP pattern that I created mainly using chord tones and non-chord tones to provide a little bit more color to the pattern. I also experimented with moving notes around so the pattern wouldn't be too robotic and had more of a custom feel or a live feel to it. This is how it sounds without any processing. Then we're gonna make it come alive via delay, reverb, and other effects. So let's start engaging them one by one. I first applied a little bit of compression just so the notes would be smoother and more even. Nothing out of the ordinary, around 3 dB of gain reduction with a fast attack of 3.71, kind of a medium release of 112 milliseconds, and a 4:1 ratio. Next up, we have some reverb, in this case the Valhalla Vintage Verb set to 4.8 seconds, and a mix of 38.6%. Then I have an EQ taking out some of the low end and the high end. Then some kickstart or LFO tool to give the ARP a little bit of a bounce. Without it, it's a little flat. Doesn't sound bad, but definitely you get a little bit more of movement and energy with it engaged. And finally, we have a volcano filter set to low pass mode, which isn't engaged at the moment, but I just have it here for when I create the arrangement and be able to give the ARP pattern some movement. With all the effects, it sounds like this. The main lead or melodic element is a custom patch that I created in Arturia's OPX-AV. It's based on pulse waves. Here's how it sounds. I wanted this melody to have a lot of movement, so you'll see that there's a healthy combination of longer notes with short staccato notes. And I also wanted to use syncopation, so we would have notes playing between the beats to give the melody more of a lively dynamic and energetic feel. Regarding the notes that I used to create the melody, they are mostly from the pentatonic C major scale, with a couple of other notes thrown in there for good measure and for color. But mostly, as you can see here, E, D, G, and A are all part of the pentatonic major scale. This is how it sounds without any kind of processing. And here's the processing that I added. First up, a delay. Set to quarter notes 100% left and to dotted eighth notes 100% right. Then we have Valhalla vintage verb again, set to 4 seconds decay, and with a mixed dry knob set to 23.7%. Then again, some more EQ to take out the low end and the high end that I don't need. And just as with the ARP, I've instantiated a FabFilter Volcano set in low pass mode for when we need to automate the arrangement. This is how it sounds with all of the effects in. Our secondary lead or secondary melody is also a custom patch that I designed myself, but this time I used the Juno 6V by Arturia. And as you can see here, this patch is based on a sawtooth wave, and it has a bit of a fast attack but medium release, and it sounds like this on its own. So it has a bit of a brassy, trumpety sound. As you can hear, I have the delay engaged. Regarding the melodic line, I wanted it to feel different than the main melody, so I went with something that sounds rhythmically different. However, the notes are still a combination of chord tones and non-chord tones, and primarily what I'm using here, again, is the C major pentatonic scale. This is how it sounds without any processing. Well, no processing except the delay. Now let me show you, just as with the other sounds, I've instantiated a Valhalla vintage verb set to 4 seconds, concert hall, 1980s color, with a mix set to 50.7%. I've also engaged Kickstart 2 to give it movement and bounce. And the same deal with the EQ. Some high pass to get rid of the low end and low pass to get rid of a little bit of the high end. With all the effects engaged, this is how it sounds. Now that we've covered all our parts or voices, let's take a listen to our main stack. So I'm just gonna go play the tracks one by one and actually unmute them as I go along until we get to a full sounding main stack or main loop. We're gonna start out with the kick and the snare. Cool. The hi-hat. Now the clap. Now the bass. Let's add the ARP. Now the main lead. secondary lead. Great, so this is our raw material for our mini track. For a 1.5 minute track, as we are going to do today, with these parts is going to be enough. Now, if we were to turn this into a 3.5 minute, 4 minute arrangement, probably we could use another alternate melody, possibly another supporting harmonic element, maybe like a pad or chords. But for now, like I mentioned, with these 5 or 6 elements, we're going to do just fine. So let's head over to the arrangement section and drive this home. For the purpose of this tutorial, I went ahead and used our main stack and created a 40-bar arrangement. Very simple, but also using a lot of the arrangement philosophy that TimeCop1983 typically or commonly uses in his tracks. Our overall approach, like I mentioned, is going to be very simple, but we're going to start with an intro section, 8 bars long. All the sections are 8 bars, just to keep it, again, very, very simple. Then we have an A section, which is also 8 bars long, a main section where the main lead comes in, then a secondary section where the secondary lead comes in, and then we're going to close out with an outro that's also 8 bars long. It's very common for TimeCop1983 to use 2 or 3 voices or parts as the glue that holds the arrangement together. So for example, you can have the bass and an arp play throughout the entire track, and then have other elements come in, come out, filtered in, filtered out, or faded in, faded out, and the same with other secondary harmonic elements such as pads and other like electric guitar riffs and this and that. So we're also incorporating some of that into this arrangement. We have the bass on the intro, and we also have an arp or the main arp during the intro. Then on the A section, we're going to continue with the bass and the arp. We're going to add the kick and the snare. Then we're going to get to the main section where we're going to have still the bass, arp, the kick and the snare, but we're going to add the hats and the clap for variation. Here, we're also going to drop our main lead. The main lead, we started playing it halfway through the A section, but filtered in slowly. So we're going to hear it full bandwidth or in its full color only until we get to this main section. And all of this is kind of a teaser. And I'll also go one by one on the automation that all of these parts have. Then in this secondary section, we're going to have our secondary lead. And for the outro, it's going to be the same as the intro, where we have the bass and the arp, but with the reverse automation. I'll cover that shortly. And a couple of interesting things are that between the A section and this secondary section, as transitions, we have a filter sweep here. We also have a filter sweep on the main channel, on the main mix channel. That was the 30,000 foot view of how I put this arrangement together. Now let's look at the specific automation that all of these tracks have. And again, TimeCop1983 typically has very simple arrangements. One of his strategies to keep them very interesting and dynamic is constantly having things filter in or filter out, so the arrangement feels like it's very alive, organic, like it's always moving. Things are coming in and coming out. Let's take a look at the automations in the bass. I've drawn in some filter cutoff automation, so you see here during the intro that the filter is closed and then it starts opening up. And then throughout the main sections of the track, it's opening and closing just a little bit. Never too intense so the bass drops out completely, but you can still feel that it is changing. That bit of movement, we can feel it more than hear it. And then when we get to the outro, we close the filter. That's what I meant when I said that the outro is the same as the intro, just like the opposite automation. Great. I've also automated the sustain of the bass, so it's gonna increase during the intro and it's gonna decrease during the outro, and here in the main sections it's gonna have a little bit of movement just so the bass texture changes. Nothing too dramatic, but again it's more felt than heard. Then the drums don't have any kind of automation. What you see is what you get. The only thing is that you see before these sections transition, I have a small gap in the drums, like the last two beats where the kick and the snare hit. They have been deleted, so it leaves a little bit of space. Now the ARP has a very similar treatment to the bass. I've also drawn in some filter frequency or cutoff automation, and just like the bass, it starts out closed, opens up towards the A section, and then throughout the main sections of the track, it opens and closes. This one is a little bit more dramatic. The cutoff automation in the ARP is heard way more than the bass, and the idea or the reason behind that is that when the main lead and the secondary lead play, I don't want the ARP to overpower or steal the thunder from those two melodic elements. So I want the ARP to be a little bit more subdued and more in the background. And then when we get to the outro, I close down the filter. Similar to the bass, in this case, for the ARP, I drew in some automation for the decay, again, just to have the texture of the ARP change throughout the track. The main lead also has some automation drawn in. Once the main lead comes in during this main section, you see that I didn't automate anything. But before it, remember that I showed you that the main lead starts like halfway through the section before. So in order for it to be more felt than heard, we start off with a very closed filter and gradually, and here very abruptly, open it up towards the end. So once this main section kicks in, we can hear the main lead in its full glory. Now the main lead also has, this automation is simply to engage and disengage the bypass switch of the filter plugin on the main lead. I just don't want it to be active all the time, only when we have this filter movement. Then let's see the secondary lead. It doesn't have any kind of automation. The noise sweep, which is what I use for transitioning from one section to the next, at least 2 times in this quick arrangement. Here I'm automating the cutoff filter. So that's what it's doing. And finally, I have a filter applied to my main fader during these transitions where we have the noise filter as well. So the filter is opening and then closing only on these two instances. And similar to the main lead automation, I also like to bypass this filter that I have on my main fader. I don't want it to be active all the time, only when we're doing this automation move. That's pretty much it. So part of the magic of TimeCop is all the automation that he uses. So again, the track feels alive, feels like it is always moving, even though he may have a few elements that are always playing, right? The texture of those elements is constantly changing. Great. So I'll see you in the final playthrough of the track. Wow, we've covered a lot of ground today. I hope that you found this useful and that I was able to get you closer to making the synthwave music that's in your heart. If you have any specific questions or comments regarding anything that we covered today or anything related to synthwave music in general, just let me know in the comments. I'll now leave you with a full playthrough of our mini track. Thank you very much for watching.